Welcome back to Beyond the Script. Today, we're going to talk about how boundary work is the same as business work and why boundaries are so important energetically. Let me back up. Why life boundaries are so important energetically to bleed into your business and to give you a stronger business and a stronger sense of boundaries in your business. So, let me tell you first, I was often the person who thought that boundaries were like walls. When you're not used to having boundaries, it is very much a feeling of I'm the bad guy. And I fell right into that all the time because it was so uncomfortable. Because if you want to keep the peace or, whatever your reasoning is, it can feel difficult. I also feel like self-awareness, when we're very self-aware of how other people can feel when it comes to subconscious beliefs and things like that, like the more self-aware you are, it's like the harder boundaries are until you get over that next bridge. Okay. And that's what was happening to me. Like I would have a hard time about, like I had like a spiritual awakening at 25 and I was like, okay, everything's going to be so good now. And then came like the boundary lesson. And I was like, okay, but now that I'm like almost hyper aware of certain things, now boundaries seem more difficult than they did before. So I always, like I said, I always saw them as walls. I always saw them as like, a limitation, or it made me the bad guy. And, just reflect on that for a moment. Maybe that's something you can relate to too. Maybe you're like, when I set a boundary, like I feel bad about it. But there's no reason to feel bad about it. And we're going to get into that. What I really didn't realize was that trying to be like everything for everyone is what was keeping me small. It is a part of what was keeping me in a loop, is because I was trying to be everything to everyone and commit to everything, including myself, right? And like a person can only stretch so far. And so when we think about boundaries, one thing that I want you to remember is that everything is energy at the end of the day, right? That's what I'm all about. Everything is energy and everything reflects each other. Everything reflects itself. And so when we have weak boundaries in life because we're overextending ourselves, or we're doing things that we're saying yes when we really want to say no, and different things like that, to quote unquote keep some peace in the outside world, even though it's tearing us up inside, well, that bleeds into our business. We have this blurred focus, we have burnout, we have overcommitment. And because of that, we carry that energy right over to our business. I want you to think about something. The next time that you're feeling burnt out in business, but you're also not where you want to be in business, I want you to ask yourself, well, where am I overextending myself in other areas of my life? Because more than likely, that burnout is not coming because you're actually tired of working on your business, or you're tired of what you're doing in business. The burnout is coming because you're not holding energy and space to have boundaries outside of your business. And so it bleeds right over, because now once it comes time to get to work, you're depleted. I personally, I did not believe this. I did not believe any of this until I started seeing a difference, and how the stronger my life boundaries were, the better my business numbers were. It's almost like the best analogy I can give you. It's almost like, let's say you drink, often, right? And, or even not often. Let's say you drink, like just on the weekends, or, you kind of have like a little bit to drink every day, or whatever it is, or you're having like junk food all the time. It doesn't even have to be alcohol. You're having junk food all the time. And you don't necessarily feel bad every day. You just kind of like get used to how you're feeling. You're like, okay, well, I don't feel like 100%, but you don't even know that you feel 100% because you don't know what 100% is. And then you like go on a cleanse. You're like, okay, I'm going to cut out alcohol for 90 days, or I'm going to, stop eating fast food for 90 days, or whatever it is, right? 30 days. It doesn't have to be 90, 30 days, 21 days, whatever it is, right? You decide to do like some form of a cleanse or a detox. And then all of a sudden you cut this stuff out, and you're like, wow, this is what I've been missing. I feel absolutely amazing. And you didn't even know like how good you could feel because you were so busy consuming these things. That's what it was for me with the boundaries. Okay. That's exactly what it was for me with the boundaries, where I was like, I didn't even realize how much my lack of life boundaries was affecting my business until I started to have stronger boundaries. Then all of it like played out and made sense, and I was like, okay, this is interesting, right? This is very interesting how I've been living. And I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. Productivity is not always what we think in terms of boundaries and business. Just because you're getting all of your business tasks done does not mean that you have solid boundaries. That's not a good indicator. And I used to believe that it was. I used to be like, okay, I can do all the things because I'm still getting my tasks done. But it wasn't until I started to uphold boundaries in life that I realized I was getting business tasks done better. I actually had a larger capacity for what I needed to do. Okay. Because I was now more so committed to my purpose. I was committed to things that lit me up versus being committed to pleasing others. Boundaries were not easy for me, you guys. Okay. Boundaries were not easy because let me give you a little backstory. When I first started my business, before I took a break, my husband was not my husband at the time, but we were living together, and he wasn't like 100% supportive of my business, and this is not a dig on him at all. But he wasn't 100% supportive. He just kind of didn't really believe that like people just did that, right? And in hindsight, I was not the best about like, I don't know. I like live between like realistic and delusion. So I was like, I'm going to hit 100K next year, like knew nothing about business. And he's like, yeah, okay. Like we need to pay the bills today. Right. So it was kind of like that. And I would get triggered by that. I would get triggered by him not necessarily believing in it until I learned like about belief systems and things like that. I would get triggered by this. And so I'd get triggered by it. And then when things weren't working, I'd be like, oh, it's because he doesn't support me, right? But that wasn't true. That wasn't true at all. It was because I was so triggered that I was not setting the boundaries of work time with him. I was not really explaining in a mature way to be like, no, this is something that I really want to do and I'm going to see it through, and structuring my time properly. I wasn't doing any of that. I was all over the place. And even in being all over the place, I was getting a lot of the tasks that I, had set out to get done. They were getting completed, but my energy was off because I'm trying to do this like when he's not around or he's not home. And the reason being was because I was always just so triggered by him saying like, you're probably not going to make 100K next year. I don't know what that beep was. We're going to keep going. um and in hindsight, like in that instance, yes, he was right. But it really came down to like my lack of boundary. So like today, fast forward to now, and he is supportive of my business. He is supportive of my business, even if it's, not where I personally want it to be. I do have his support now. And it took time to get here because it took me setting boundaries to get here. Once he saw that I was serious about it and that this wasn't like, just a new hobby I was picking up, because I am notorious for that. It was like, okay, he could see how serious I was. And then he was like, whether he agrees or not is another conversation. I don't really know. It's not my place to know. Right. But he is supportive, and he hopes it does well. And all of this came because I finally sat down and held some boundaries of, hey, this is important to me. So sometimes I will be working on this during the evening time when we are, hanging out and relaxing or whatever, right? Like I will still be working on this. That was a hard boundary for me to learn, but I learned it and I said it. And because of that, like things have picked up. I saw the numbers start to represent and reflect more of the energy that I was carrying in outside life. And so that's what I'm saying to you is sometimes it's the boundaries that we're not holding due to uncomfortability, due to being emotionally dysregulated, due to being triggered and not being emotionally mature enough to explain things to others, that it bleeds right into our business. It bleeds right into how we're running our business. It bleeds right into how we're operating. It bleeds right into all of that. Because what happens is then you start being committed to everybody else. You start being committed to what everybody else wants. So if you set business time up and you're not holding boundaries around your business time, and somebody invites you out to go bowling, or somebody invites you out to, go to the beach or whatever, right? They invite you somewhere. And then you commit to saying yes because you don't want to disappoint that person. Well, now you're rushing through your tasks, or worse, you're not getting them done. And if you're not getting them done, then you're not even fully present in the event that you're doing because you are so focused on what you still need to get done. Instead of becoming committed to our business, our purpose, and the things that we're supposed to be doing for ourselves, we become committed to pleasing others. But when we're committed to pleasing others and committed to ourselves, then we have this energetic overcommitment. We're committed to way too many things. We're committed to letting somebody else, or making sure that somebody else, is not disappointed at us, while also being committed to what we need to be doing for ourselves, and being committed to wanting to do a good job, and all the things, right? It just becomes chaos at this point. It just becomes like this energetic chaos. And then you bring that chaos to your business. And then because that chaos is in your business, what happens is you have clients, if you have well, we all would have customers, but if you have clients, if you're in like a client facing type of business, we bring those same leaky boundaries into our business. So now we're overextending ourselves when we don't need to be. Now we have dysregulation in our business. Now we are not only not holding boundaries with people in our personal lives, but then we're not holding boundaries with clients. And this can look like, just over delivering to the point of exhaustion, undercharging, not being clear on what we're meant to be doing, not being clear on our offers, rushing through tasks, shallow progress, blaming others, as I would once do. I would blame other people for why my business was not where I wanted it to be, as if I wasn't the creator of my own reality. I would blame everybody else. Oh, well, it's because I have to work. It's because my husband's not supportive. It's because, my friends don't understand, right? All the things. I would blame everybody else. But that's just because I didn't have any boundaries. That's because I didn't have any boundaries, okay? And I said something key there that I want you to remember. You are the creator in your reality. Period. That's it. You create your reality. Your boundaries and the boundaries that you hold will reflect the reality that you're creating. Okay? If you are triggered and reactive and all the things in life, then you will also be reactive in business. You will be triggered in business. You will be not fully able to serve because you will place all of your clients' emotions and wins and losses and stuff right on. You will internalize them, or you will be reactive of them instead of holding and being the anchor. An anchor doesn't move. An anchor is a great example because an anchor has a boundary. The anchor is supposed to stay tied to the floor so the boat doesn't wash away or float away, right? You're supposed to be that anchor, but the anchor is in the boundaries. Okay? You think the boat is happy with the anchor's boundaries? Probably not. The boat might want to fly away. I mean, float away. Lord. Anyways. So let's get into the power of the hard no. Transitioning into the moment that I started saying no. It was, at first, it's very uncomfortable. At first, when you're used to saying yes to everything else, when you're used to saying yes to others, when you're used to, putting your own needs last, it's uncomfortable to hold a boundary. I mentioned it earlier. You start to feel like the bad guy. You're like, I am going to disappoint this person. And it's interesting because humans have no problem we have no problem disappointing ourselves. We do it all the time. We have no problem disappointing ourselves. We have no problem saying no to ourselves if it means saying yes to others. And yet when we reverse it, that's when we have a problem. That's when it becomes just, uncomfortable and all of that. Holding boundaries also goes with moralities. And so what's difficult sometimes is we have these certain beliefs and certain moralities that we want to, that we have to operate in, that we have, that's what makes us us. We have to operate in these moralities. And so when somebody goes against that, and it's somebody that we respect or somebody that we want a relationship with, not even like a romantic relationship, just a relationship with, and they go against that, then we have to, there's a longer process to your boundaries. You have to not only hold the boundary, but then you almost have to grieve what you thought was going to be with this, with this person, with the relationship or whatever, right? And I can honestly say that there is a lot more anxiety and discomfort in the moments leading up to your hard no. Once the no is out and you start saying no more often, you are energetically rewarded. Okay, there's no other way to put it. When you start to hold your own power, saying no when you mean it, and hold firm in boundaries because of your beliefs, because of how you operate, you are energetically rewarded. This may look like downloads. This may look like clarity on ideas that you have been, circling around in your head for a while. This may look like new leads in your business. I'm not even exaggerating. The more that I hold my boundaries, the better the numbers look. But besides the numbers, the energetic clarity that comes through, it feels like a reward. There's no other way for me to frame it. It really feels like a reward, especially in a moment when you're, anxious about your boundary. Or pay attention next time. I'm telling you, pay attention next time. Write this down. Next time that you hold a boundary and you are uncomfortable with it while leading up to it, you're uncomfortable with what's going to happen, but you hold the boundary and you hold true on the boundary, I want you to pay attention to how you're rewarded. Be self-aware with how you're rewarded. And I'm calling it a reward because that's what it feels like. Okay. Some of you might listen and be like, that's crazy. I don't agree like that. We're rewarded in downloads. Listen, that's just how it feels to me. Okay. But pay attention to how you're rewarded. I was rewarded in so many downloads when I held my last uncomfortable boundary. I'm talking a boundary that felt like I don't believe the universe tests us. And in this moment, I was like, I'm being tested. I have to be. There's no other way to explain this. And, in holding the boundary, and I'll tell you, I mean, I had the anxiety before I held it. I was like, I don't want to do this. I contemplated back and forth, like maybe I should just suck it up and, do what I said. And then it was like, no, that goes against all of my beliefs. It goes against my morals. And so somebody at the end of the day is going to be disappointed. It's either going to be me or the person that I'm holding the boundaries with. And I was like, well, I'm tired of being the disappointed one, so I'm going to hold my boundary. So it was uncomfortable, but I'll tell you, I was rewarded in several downloads. Clarity on a lot of things that I have been asking for clarity on came through from this boundary. And so I'm sharing this with you because it does bleed into your business. And I want you to sit and I want you to reflect on where in your life are your boundaries leaky? Where in your life are you committed to too many things that you actually don't want to be committed to? Grab a piece of paper and write a list. You can do an intuitive writing prompt with this. Set a timer for 10 minutes and grab a piece of paper. And at the top of the page, say, the boundaries in my life are leaking with. And for 10 minutes, just start naming things. I'm sure you can already think of one or two just off the top of your head. But the more you write it out, you will see there's probably a lot more than you realize. Because what happened with me is in holding my boundary, I realized in how many other places with the same person, my boundaries were blurred. My boundaries were leaking. And I was blind to a lot of it because I wasn't facing any of that until I held the first boundary. And when I held the first boundary, then everything else made sense. And I was like, wow, Nikki, you have had leaky boundaries for a while. Are they as leaky as they normally would have been? No, but they're still leaky. And so now I'm free of all of that. Now I get to be free of all of that. And I want you to be able to be free of all of that. Okay. The last thing I will say on this topic is I want you to remember that boundaries is a measure of self-trust. When you honor yourself and honor your beliefs, and set boundaries that protect your energy, you are also proving to yourself that you can be trustworthy, that you are able to trust yourself to say no and mean no, and say yes and mean yes. When we start doing that, saying yes when we really want to say no, those feelings that that arise in our body is because of an energetic mismatch. It's because I'm sorry, it's training ourselves that we can't trust ourselves, because now we're not in line. We're not in alignment here. Okay. So think about your boundaries as a measure of self-trust. So if you're like, Nikki, I struggle with self-trust. I don't know how to trust myself. Well, start there. Start with your boundaries. Go back to that list I just told you to write a few moments ago. Okay. And think about it this way as well. A lot of the things that are good for us start off uncomfortable. So setting boundaries is uncomfortable at first. The more that you do it, the more comfortable it will become. Okay. Holding your boundaries is holding the authority. That is being the leader of your own life. That is being the creator of your own life. Okay. That is like being, well, the authority. And so the next time that you feel scattered, or you're feeling resentful in business, or you are, feeling like it's not working, or whatever it is that you're telling yourself, pause for a moment. And instead of looking directly at the strategy, I want you to look at the moment that you're saying yes when you mean no. I want you to look at where your boundaries in your life are leaking and how that may replicate over in your business. And really look at it. Okay. And I want you to also remember the next level of expansion for you, your next level of expansion. It's not necessarily found in a new plan. It's going to start with a new boundary. So, the last thing I'll say, for like the third time I've said that, is if this episode definitely hit home for you, if you are like, yes, I hear it, it resonates, I needed this one. For one, take a moment to journal. Like I said earlier, take a moment to journal on it. But then for two, share it with somebody else who needs to hear about boundaries. Share it with another entrepreneur, another business owner, whomever needs to hear about these boundaries. Okay. And if you are listening, I have a whole Substack article on this over on my Substack. I do write on my Substack like 4 to 5 times a week at minimum for subscribers. So be sure that you subscribe over there if you like to discuss all things like intuition, identity, creation, and business energetics. You can find that over on my Substack. These are where the deeper reflections and practices are. There is also an option to upgrade in my Substack, and this is where I give you tangible things so that you can implement what we're talking about here. But you should have some tangible things just from this episode, because I did give you a journal prompt. So until next Tuesday, enjoy your day, and I will talk to you all then.